Hello and welcome to the Forgotten War. This channel seeks to talk about the Korean War, a war where so many had lost their lives in the fields, yet so little is talked outside of veteran circles. So, after 70 long years since the start of the Korean War, this channel seeks to inform people about this often forgotten war, who was involved in it, what happened, and the implications it has today. Videos would probably come out every week or so. Take note, however, this is not an official historian's channel. Now, if you want 8 hours of flawless videos on this topic, then look out for another channel or a Ken Burns documentary. I'm here solely as a fan of history, hosting a little podcast with a shitty microphone and a bad graphic thingy to inform a lot of people about this subject, so all fact checks, comments would be much appreciated. So on that bright note, let's start with the first episode on this series talking about the years before 1950 in Korean history, the prelude to a war that would leave many dead and crippled. So people coming into this channel, I guess, would have at least some knowledge about history. I mean, you don't see a lot of people watching Hoi 4 videos or oversimplified videos without having some basic knowledge about the Second World War. So it's the same logic as that. But when it comes to Korean history, not a lot of people know about it, and not a lot of people have that much interest upon it. Like, there are 3 reasons why people really take interest in Korea: North Korea, Samsung, and K-pop. So, to really talk about the Korean War, we gotta take a few steps back in history to provide ample context. So, from 1910 to 1945, the peninsula was under the colonial rule of the Japanese Empire. And for the lack of a better word, it was pretty fucked up. Now, Koreans, they didn't have proper voting rights, they were subject to search and seizures by the Japanese police, and in the latter stages of colonial rule during the Second World War, Koreans were forced to change their names into Japanese ones, were forbidden to use the Korean language, and many Korean men and women were drafted by the Japanese military to serve as conscripts or as sex slaves. Now, I can already see some Weeaboo Hatalia fans bitching about how, the colonial rule civilized Korea. And and to some extent I can agree with that. The Japanese, they built railroads, they built factories and other industries in the peninsula, and they got rid of the millennia-old social caste system that plagued many peasants and serfs living in Korea. But the reason why their rule deserves such harsh criticism, even to this day, is because all this so-called modernization, it was not at all for the Korean people, but for the benefit of the Japanese Empire. They built the railroads so they can ship Korean goods back to Japan efficiently and quickly. They built those schools to raise a generation of collaborators to the Japanese regime. It's basically the same as building better pens for chickens so we can eat them later on. And in that case, we gotta ask, should the chickens feel grateful to us? And the obvious answer is no, and at least I don't think so. But despite all the repression that continued in the Korean peninsula and restriction of civil liberties and basic human rights for that matter, people still rose up in defiance of colonial rule. Now, they organized mass demonstrations against the Japanese. They assassinated prominent Japanese politicians and generals. They tried to raise international awareness about the injustice of Japanese rule and the need for Korean independence. Now, to talk about all the people and organizations involved in the independence movement and insurgencies, that would be very long. That would be a 3-month series in and of itself. So, to simplify things, I'll talk about the 2 major groups, the right wing and the left wing. They were semi-united in the common goal of the independence of Korea, but their political vision for the independent peninsula differed wildly. Prominent left-wing leaders such as Kim Il-sung and Park Kun-young received support from Communist China and the Soviet Union in the aim of making a socialist nation in Korea, while prominent right-wing leaders such as Kim Koo and Syngman Rhee maintained a fervent anti-communist stance and received support from Chiang Kai-shek and the United States. While there were some political differences and even violence between these 2 parties, until 1945 they were still working along with another in accordance to achieve the ultimate goal of independence. But come 1945 and the surrender of the Japanese Empire, political conflicts between the right and left wing became more palpable. The two parties fervently disagreed upon the treatment of Japanese collaborators, whether or not the peninsula was to come under their trusteeship by the United Nations, and the political ideologies of communism versus anti-communism. Consequently, political violence was widespread. Right-wing activists organized the White Shirt Society, a terrorist group that assassinated left-wing activists in Korea, while left-wing activists organized the Workers' Party of South Korea, a similar terrorist organization. And as a result, prominent leaders who helped the independence of the nation and who deserve much respect and adulation from the populace, such as Ro Won-hyung of the left and Kim Koo of the right, they were shot down in broad daylight, and the political atmosphere of the peninsula grew more unstable as time went on. In 1948, after years of civil strife and political division, the Korean peninsula was officially split between two independent governments. To the north, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea under Kim Il-sung, and to the south, the Republic of Korea under President Syngman Rhee. But the north-south split didn't mean that political violence ever stopped. In the north, communists led by the Workers' Party waged a bloody insurrection in Jeju Island that attempted to topple the southern government into a communist one, and thousands of insurrectionists and thousands of civilians were killed as a result of this rebellion. In the north, frequent political purges were led against the political rivals of Kim Il-sung, who were subject to kangaroo trials and summary executions, with casualties reaching the hundreds, if not thousands. Both governments waged an espionage and propaganda war where hundreds of spies were caught, tortured, and executed. And in the midst of all this political turmoil, Kim Il-sung made his way up to Beijing and Moscow to start a conspiracy that would start a brutal brothers' war of death and destruction. So that concludes this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more quality content every week. If you have any suggestions, wishes, concerns, then please leave them on the comment section below. See you next week.